Hello.
Hey, John. How are you, brother? Good morning or good evening for you. It's Dave Lawrence at Hawaii Public Radio.
Yeah, hello, Dave. I'm fine. How are you? Yeah, it is evening. It's already dark here. And
Good-
you're an early morning, yes?
Yes, very early morning for us, but just a pleasure to have time with you again. Means a lot. Giving you a big hug and a high five.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you.
Nice.
You been well?
Yep, I've been well, thank you, brother. And you? I guess I don't have to ask, but I'm hoping you've been doing real good too.
Yeah. I've got a little issue with the right hand with some kind of budding arthritis, but we're working on it. We've got the doctors taking care of it, so it's all good.
Sending you positive energy on that. Don't need anything affecting those
Thank you. I'll send some right back at you.
those lightning
Thank you.
hands. It's HPR, All Things Considered. I'm Dave Lawrence. Fantastic returning guest joining us. He is celebrating a new live record, John McLaughlin and Jimmy Herrings live in San Francisco. And it's an album that dials in on just one set of a night that featured John's band, The Fourth Dimension, Jimmy Herring's band, The Invisible Whip, doing their own sets before a third set of music featuring them together playing the Mahavishnu Orchestra classics. And that's what the record is made up of. And if it wasn't enough, I understand their Meeting of the Spirits tour, which did not come to Hawaii, had a 9-member orchestra to augment the Mahavishnu set. We'll learn a lot more about it as we welcome back a guy that both Pat Metheny and Jeff Beck are reported to call the greatest living guitarist, John McLaughlin. Aloha, brother John.
I think they're exaggerating a little bit, but it's very sweet, isn't it? Anyway, no, I know. Every time we go to California, I'm thinking, why are we going to Hawaii? But Hawaii is the totally other side of the planet. You guys are like 12 hours difference from me, aren't you?
We certainly
Incredible.
are. We are, and people are always. I get little emails when Billy Cobham came through. Somebody was sending me little historical facts of when you were here with him. So people are constantly remembering your appearances and wishing that we'd get scheduled for something.
Oh, I remember that. That was, well, we were with Carlos, weren't we?
Yep,
I mean,
exactly. At the
1973, was it?
yeah, that wasn't your last time here, was it? Did you come again?
I have been there. Yeah, we came back. We did a concert, but that was also a really long time ago when we think.
80s or something.
No, wasn't I with Paco and Al? I think so.
Yeah, you could have. He's never sent me Steve, the mystery emailer, who sends me all the historic stuff. I don't remember seeing that, but it could have been. Al was just here too, and you came up during that.
Yeah, that would be in the 80s.
Right.
With Carlos, that was the early 70s. That would be like 73.
Yeah.
With Paco and Al, that would be more like
83.
80. Oh, man.
One of those early 80s.
Yeah, one of those. A long time ago. Amazing, huh? Yeah, I have such fond memories of the beautiful island of Hawaii.
Well, we got to get you back here somehow, even if that was the final tour.
Yes.
Maybe you'll be, because I understand you're still going to do projects here and there, right? It's just not going to be in a touring sort of format.
Yeah, the album that you mentioned, Live in San Francisco, was really my way just to thank Americans in general, for marvelous support that they gave me from the very beginning, really. From '69, when I started to play with Miles and Tony Williams, and then the Mahavishnu came, and that they really took it to heart. So it was really, for me, the best way to say thank you and goodbye, because actually touring America is the only way it works is if you really make a long tour. Yeah, I've done tours there. I did one, must be about 3-4 years ago. It was just an East Coast tour, because even though the agent said, I can book you in the Midwest, and we go out to the West Coast, but actually it was, to really make it worthwhile, you have to tour for a long time, and it's almost like too much for me now. I don't want to do these 2-month tours. You know what I mean?
Totally.
On the road.
Totally.
It's nice when you're young.
It becomes work when it's that kind of rigorous schedule, and I get that. I totally do. It's cool how you kind of brought it full circle in some ways as you're talking. Who gave you the idea to bring in Jimmy and then to be featuring the Mahavishnu set at the end of the show like that?
Well, in fact, you just said the magic words, because I wanted to make it full circle. Because Mahavishnu was born in America in 1971. And the way that band, against all expectations, including my own, was just phenomenal. And then to this day, I have people write to me, they're just hardcore fans of that music, which is so much part of my history, personal and musical. But I forgot what I was going to say now. About
who came up with the tour
again?
I was asking how'd you get the idea? I guess.
Exactly. Sorry about that.
No problem.
The idea, what I mentioned before, was to make a really nice tour. And to make a really nice tour, it's one thing to go out with one band, and it's another thing to go out with two bands, which is even better, and do a two-setter. But a really good show is when you take two bands and they both do a set each, and then you have a third set with both bands at the same time.
Yeah.
And the third set playing exclusively Mahavishnu music. So the renaissance of bringing Mahavishnu back to life, I really wanted to do. And Jimmy and his band, The Invisible Whip, I'm sure you know of them, the musicians.
Yep.
They kind of grew up with Mahavishnu music. So we started rehearsing. I was just amazed how they were playing it like they wrote it. And that's, it was so lovely, really, because there was a great spirit in the band.
Yeah, no question. I mean, did someone suggest him to you, though? I mean, how did you say Jimmy Herrings band? How did that idea first, I'm just curious, of all people.
You got to go back in time, probably about 5-6 years, at least. And somebody sent me one of Jimmy's recordings.
Okay.
It's just one piece, but it was a piece that I recorded in 1972 with the original Mahavishnu Orchestra. And he did a version that was so amazing, Dave. I mean, truth to tell, when I heard it, I thought, gee, I should have done it like that myself. but it was a long time ago. And he did a solo on it that was outstanding. So from the birth, that was his band, Invisible Whip. So from the outset, this guy is just an amazing guitar player, and he's got a real love for the music of Mahavishnu. I mean, could I ask for anything more?
No, it proved it. It proved it to you. I get it.
Of course, shortly after I heard it, we met and we played together, and he's just delightful. What a wonderful guitar player and a super guy. And this whole band are like him. This is a great spirit. And this, Dave, this is, you can find bands and great musicians, but you don't necessarily get that spirit in the band. This collective spirit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It takes a special kind of attitude, a special kind of way of awareness. And Jimmy and his band, they had it. They had it. It was just so easy. First of all, they rehearsed it they nailed it. All those complicated arrangements that were made in those days. I mean, there's some very sophisticated stuff in those. Fortunately, I had the scores in the book.
Okay.
I made it many years ago. Because if I hadn't had the scores, I'll tell you, I would have had to transcribe those things from the album. That would have taken a long time.
Right.
It would have come back, I know, because it's all inside there. But I was really lucky to have the scores. Of course, I made sure that Jimmy and the gang had all the scores, so I had the right notes. But by the time we got to rehearsal, they were flying. They were flying. I mean, it was just so easy. And 6 weeks, imagine 6 weeks on the road, 2 bands, I mean, with 9 musicians, as like about 4 or 5 technicians, tour managers, just general, helpers, making sure everything goes right, and not one sour note, not one sour word. I mean, that's special. It's really lovely.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has that sound, and you can see the photos and stuff and video I've seen. You guys clearly click, and it sounds like it. You tell it in a great way. I mean, obviously, he was very familiar with it, and he is a nice guy. I remember meeting him with the Aquarium Rescue Unit when he was with Colonel Bruce many years ago. He was very sweet then. So when you talk about that, putting the band on the road, it makes me think of dialing in on, and you were talking about also the complicated arrangements of this music, and when you went to revisit it. In the beginning, for when the original project was out there, I mean, for a lot of people, the name Mahavishnu Orchestra is legendary. Then there's a group of people who are listening now who are uninitiated. And when you think about this kind of fusion of jazz and, to me, like hard rock, how would you describe that sound and intent of the original project? And when you went to take it on the road back then, it must have been very confusing or even challenging for promoters to figure out how to book that.
Yeah, to a degree. But I don't know if you were around in that time.
No, I was a baby.
Okay. So the thing, the whole attitude, the whole vibe was very different. And the attitude of the promoters was enlightened, if I can use that word, because they would get a band. They would, some name band, and then they say, well, who's the opposite of that? Let's find somebody who are nothing like the headliner, and we put them together because maybe people will discover some music, and which is why Mahavishnu ended up doing gigs with the Eagles, whom I really love, one of my all-time favorite bands, Aerosmith, James Taylor, Leo Kottke, George Carlin, Cheech and Chong. We had some amazing combinations. I mean, like even later when Shakti came, okay, it's not. From 1976, and we would be with. We did gigs with what was the name of that band? Like a heavy metal band.
Black Sabbath?
Black Sabbath, yeah. I was thinking Metallica. It wasn't Metallica, Black Sabbath. I mean, we're sitting on the carpet with acoustic instruments, and there's like some real headbangers in the audience. But they loved it, So it was a whole other vibe in those days.
Right.
The music was paramount, and people were ready to listen to anything. It's different, but it's music, so let's check it out. As opposed to today where, everything is just like, well, you got this kind of band, okay, put another the same kind of band with it,
Right.
They do this. And it's really...
formulaic in a lot of ways today.
Yeah, well, we've become so kind of conservative society itself. Haven't we?
And you described the tour well, being able to do, even though it was exhausting, a long tour by yourselves. You kind of take that element of having to deal with that mindset out of it. I mean, you're not getting those unusual packages like before, but at least you're able to conduct the tour sort of on your own because it's a completely different era now, right? You didn't have tour mates when you went on this tour. It was just you guys as a triple bill.
It was a double bill with a triple set.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, it was a double bill with 3 sets basically, but no opening act beyond the two of you guys.
No, we were the Jimmy and me, we were the opening act
Right.
in the final set. But that was really cool because we come up, we did like a 45-minute, 50-minute set, not too long, because, we knew the third set is the big one.
Right.
So, but that, I think, that was a very nice surprise for the audience, because you get these two set concerts, two band, two set concerts. But how often do the bands come back on stage and play together?
It's almost impossible to see something. You can only think of like Earth, Wind and Fire in Chicago. I mean, a handful of bands that have actually done that.
Yeah, it's really rare.
Very, very rare thing.
Yeah, but for us it was, and the thing is, we of course we had fun playing our sets. Different kind of music, Jimmy's music, my music, other kind of music, where Pharoah Sanders maybe. But then come the third set, we'd be all on stage, and two basses, two drummers, two keyboard players, three keyboard players, doubling on violin, two guitar players. That's a heavyweight band, especially with Mahavishnu. And you know what? It was not just the spirit was so right for the Mahavishnu music, because Mahavishnu music is not just the notes. It's got a vibe. It's got a spirit. It's loud. It's strong. It's bold. It's like it's those aspects of the human being that I admire. To just be fearless. Of course, we got in the old days. We got massacred by the regular jazz community, but we didn't care. I didn't care, because we were happy doing that kind of music, and that vibe where you throw caution to the wind. You know what I'm saying? And you just go for it, because especially me in that period, and not just me but everybody. How we played the 60s. That's what I grew up in, listening to Coltrane. I mean, you listen to some of those records from Coltrane on Miles. And it was the most distinguishing characteristic of these recordings, the absolute passion of these guys. And the desire for freedom and freedom in the music. And this for me was most important of all. Yes, to play your music, of course, if you can find a way to play your music, which is really difficult today, by the way. But to be on stage and to go for just the limit, every night might be your last night, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean the energy of and was it your intention to mix that? I mean, it would be for again, there are people who have no idea what the Mahavishnu Orchestra sounds like, and I would describe it as a combination of jazz and very hard rock at times, very quiet sections that are more jazzy, and then other sections where, I mean, there's a strong dissonant sound, the guitar tone that you had at that time. Did you realize, I mean, what was your goal when you said, I'm going to make a band and we're going to make a sound that has never, ever been made before?
Well, the sound, yes, came partly from the composition, but it came from the players. And when we go back in time, I mean, the first member of the original Mahavishnu Orchestra was Billy Cobham, whom I met on the Jack Johnson recording of Miles. And after that recording, because on that recording, like the opening track right off, that's really something I started because we were all bored in the studio. Miles was talking to Tio Macero. And after about 20 minutes, I got bored, and I started doing this R&B thing, which just ended up being right off, because we hit a groove, and Miles ran in the studio and just played like I'd never heard him play before. So that thing because I started off and Billy kicked in, and we just hit a groove. That's why Miles ran in. Michael Henderson hit it. Herbie was playing, I think, Farfisa organ, some weird kind of keyboard. We hit a groove, and Miles just played. And after that session, me and Billy got really tight and really good friends. I loved the way he played. And so when thanked Miles again. Sometime, I think it was in like October 1970. I just finished a gig with him, and he turned around to me at the end in the band room, and he said, "Now it's time to find your home band." So I was on the orders, and the first guy I called was Billy. And I tried to get Tony Levin on bass, and he just joined Gary Burton's band.
Wow.
And he ended up being with Peter Gabriel, of course, beautiful bass player, stick player too. And then since I knew, what was his name, the guy from Miroslav Vitus I met him.
Weather Report?
Before Weather Report. I knew him in London when he was playing with Stan Getz.
Okay.
And we became friends then. Later we became, when I moved to New York. And actually he called me around, I think, December 19 or January 7, 1971, and said, "Listen, John, I'm putting a band together with Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul. It's called Weather Report. We want you to be in it." Can you imagine? I thought, wow, man, what? But I was like in the middle of forming the first Mahavishnu.
Unbelievable.
And I told him, I said, "I'd love to, but I've got a mission. I'm on a mission from God." Right? So anyway, he said, "Well, listen, if you need a keyboard player, there's another Czech friend of mine playing with Sarah Vaughan." I thought, if he's playing with Sarah Vaughan, he's great. And that was Jan Hammer. And he was out on the coast, on the West Coast. And I called him. I said, "Listen, you come very highly recommended by Miroslav, and I'd like to hear you play. You know, I'm putting this band together." He said, "I'm in." And I thought, that's so cool. And then I got Rick Ladd we went back to the UK, London, playing with Brian Auger in the 60s. And that was it. So the people in the band, Jerry Goodman, very important, the violin player, whom I found in a Chicago band called The Flock in 1969, 1970.
And you had already thought of John Luke at that time, and he wasn't available, I had read, right?
Yeah, but John Luke, beautiful violin player, but I wanted actually more of in a way, more a blues violinist, because there was another. Stuff Smith was a great jazz violinist, but I didn't want that style. And when I heard Jerry just fitted that thing, because he comes from the blues too, and he was perfect for the job, because we were not playing this bebop kind of thing. The whole of the 60s, I spent playing mainly rhythm and blues, rock and roll, or funk to survive. But with pleasure, don't get me wrong.
Right.
And so, I'm with the Beatles and the whole psychedelic period. It was, by the end of the 60s, this idea of what is jazz was very ambiguous, because already, people like the later albums of John Coltrane. I mean, you hear Intergalactic Space,
right?
And you say to an average jazz man, "So is this jazz?" You say, "No idea what it is."
Exactly.
So, and by the end of the 60s, Miles himself was looking to move. Tony was looking to move. This whole wonderful era of that quintet, going from the beginning of the end of the 50s all the way through to the end of the 60s, it was kind of over. Miles wanted to move on. He wanted a guitar player. He wanted more rhythm and blues in the band. He wanted more funk in the band. I just happened to be there at the right time. Lucky, really.
Oh, hugely lucky. And I mean, that was just the biggest change right there. You explained it really well. I mean, and Miles was just taking off. And when you think about that era of your life, you keep mentioning the 60s part, and something I've never heard you talk about, and maybe it's not even true. But when I did a little research, mid-60s sessions for the Rolling Stones, you caught some of those?
Yeah. I played with a lot of those. Mick, I got to know there. I always liked Mick because Mick was feisty.
It's a great word.
I really liked him. Yeah, because he got busted for grass once, and he was in the courtroom, and the the judge was gonna fine him. I don't know, a couple of £100 or something, or whatever. And he just stood up and he said, this is all bullshit. I'm going to drop some acid right now. And that's Mick. I like that. I like that. He was feisty. The band, the Stones, it was not my favorite band. I mean, they're a legend. I was much more into the Beatles because the Beatles, they reflected this whole psychedelic period much more accurately for me.
Right.
The way they organized their music, because in the very beginning, I never liked the Beatles, but from Revolver, when they started tripping, and me too, I became a big fan. In fact, the Beatles were a big influence on me.
Oh, I believe it.
The whole 60s was such an amazing decade. I mean, it's like one thing after another, with including Coltrane and Miles, the Sly and the Family Stone, James Brown, the Beatles, the Stones. I mean, it was just so creative. It was just Stevie Wonder, Motown. I mean, just great stuff coming out all the time.
Oh, there was. It's just it's just neat for your fans, for some of them to realize that the wide range of things that you accomplished prior to so many of these celebrated chapters of your life, which have achieved more attention. I just think that's cool that you would be able to be. I know they used a lot of different sessions, people, the Stones did at that time, but for you to end up actually getting to record a little bit with them, and someone else who did, who I understand, I mean, at least your Wikipedia says, and I just think it would be a fascinating story to hear, and again, I've not heard you talk about it, giving guitar lessons to Jimmy Page. Is that true? And any stories?
Yeah, but, I mean, when he was like 17, I was 18, I mean, what am I going to teach him? I'm going to say, this chord, Jimmy? Hey, man, not too much, but we became friends, and all of that gang, John Paul Jones. I was playing with John Paul Jones in an R&B band, Herbie Goins and the Nighttimers, and I taught him harmony before Zeppelin was even formed. But to come back to the original, not the original, the question you asked before about the music of Mahavishnu, there was no intent on my part to make fusion music, Dave. The problem was, or rather the situation was, there were so many competing, in a nice way, influences in me, whether they were jazz, of course, growing up with that, but the R&B, because in my opinion, you take the rhythm and blues out of jazz, you don't have much jazz left, really. You take the blues out of jazz, you don't have much jazz left. But that I got from Miles and Coltrane, and of course, a long time ago when I first picked up the guitar, and I was completely swayed and dominated by the music of Muddy Waters, Lead Belly, Son House, the great Mississippi blues players. So they all kind of came out, and then there was the Hispanic influence that blossomed subsequently with my association with Paco. There was the Indian influence, because by 1971, when the first Mahavishnu came out, I'd been studying Indian music for 2 years. And also, of course, I was into my
Sri Chinmoy thing.
Sri Chinmoy, my meditation guru, and asking the great existential questions of life. And the thing about India too is that the philosophy and the music of India are one thing, whereas in the West they're considered kind of separate intellectual departments, if you know what I mean. But the great thing about Indian music is that it's totally inclusive. It means it embraces every aspect of the human psyche, the human being, and that's what's beautiful. I mean, we got lucky because Coltrane in 64, 65, when he made A Love Supreme, with one album, I mean, he integrated this spiritual dimension, this awareness of the divine into jazz. I mean, what an accomplishment.
And when you hear Eternity's Breath, that's such a great example of what you're talking about, too, with that spiritual overtone integrated in with this massive rock sort of riff, and then the jam and the violin solo in that, yet all of it with that spiritual thing that you're speaking of. And you kept that alive onto this record, which is one of the remarkable things about this album. John McLaughlin and Jimmy Herrings live in San Francisco. It features really Mahavishnu material from throughout that period of what fans love so much. You know what else it features, John, as you were talking about the development back then? You're still so fast on these albums. Obviously, Jimmy is too, but dialing back, what made you first want to go so fast? When did you discover you could even, or that was an interest? Because that's something that you also have maintained through all of the different music that you've done.
I think probably because I love the drums. I love drummers. And the drummers, they got the fastest hands of everybody. Nobody can play faster than the drummers. For me, it was a question of, what is the drummer doing? I have to know what he's doing because I want to really hang with him. I want to get very tight with the drummer. That's also part of the Indian traditions. And, in India, the melody players, the improvisers, they have to study rhythmical theory. And for me, from the word go, I wanted to be with the drummer. But to really be with the drummer means essentially that I have to know what he's doing. If I hear something that he's playing, I know what it is. I can go with it. I understand it kind of intellectually, and so it's just a question of application. And of course, some drummers play really fast. Billy Cobham, for example, Tony Williams, another example. I mean, and just to play those tempos, but I grew up with those tempos. You hear some of the tempos Coltrane played and Miles played. These guys were burning. But that was then. That was the 60s. But since I grew up with it, that was the yardstick. I had to be able to function on that level. You know what I'm saying?
I can. I mean, but it was almost like on Intermounting Flame. It just something clicked there that I hadn't. When I studied the recordings that came before that level of the intensity of the speed, the notes per minute, however you'd think of it on that, that's where to me it began, and then hit just lightning levels through your career, and then you listen to the new record and it's still there. It's just like, and that's really one of the things you were always known for, not only your intense creativeness, your innovativeness to combine so many genres into one piece of music, let alone one band, but also this speed that you developed, and you can't really remember when it when do you remember when it first got recognized, when people would look at you and be like, this guy is like, you can barely keep up with him?
Yeah, but I remember very well its inception, and it really came from Coltrane, because in Coltrane, I'd been listening to Coltrane since 1958. That's
Wow.
a long time ago.
Yep.
And so I followed him all the way. He was with Miles for a long time, but I followed him throughout that whole period. And then when he left and formed his own quartet with Elvin and McCoy and Jimmy, I followed him too. And Train, he had what somebody, Nat Hantoff, I think it was, one of these jazz critics, called sheets of sound, and he'd be like a waterfall with these notes, just coming, bubbling out like a fountain, and it hit me so beautifully. And I thought, of course, that's to get this feeling of effervescence of notes, just like irresistible. They just coming out like a fountain of water. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, now I can picture it, how you would think about it.
Yeah, this I remember very well. It was because and Miles could play any tempo, but this kind of volume of notes, it absolutely came from my emulation of trying to emulate Train on the guitar. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
No, it's huge. It's huge. Final question, and then I'll let you go because you brought us right back to that era. You mentioned some of these great blues guys that influenced you. Is it true your very first Mahavishnu Orchestra gig was opening for John Lee Hooker in New York in 1971?
Absolutely. The Whiskey A Go-Go on Bleecker. Yep. That's right.
Unbelievable.
But it was so successful, we were held over for another week, man. Hey. No, but what was so cool was John Lee was there. Because you ever see John Lee play?
I have one time.
Oh, man. I mean, he's got that tempo. He's got that tempo that's there's a tempo that can move mountains. It's too much. He's beautiful. I got to hear him every night. What a trip that was.
Oh,
it was amazing. It's a little club. I don't know, maybe 100. No, not even 80 people, 70 people.
Did he have any reaction to you guys?
What from?
I mean,
from
just
John Lee?
Yeah, just like I can't imagine because I mean, still, you guys were unloading.
Not a word. No, I didn't. I never even got a word from John Lee, except I would say thank you, John Lee, for and he just smile. Okay, you're cool. It's okay, but no chat, no chat.
I love it.
I didn't care. I was just happy to see him.
Of course.
And we were just excited to play the band. I mean, with Jerry and Jan and Rick and Billy, we were just like off. I mean, it's a long time ago, though. It was like 47 years ago.
You brought it full circle, though, brother, and that's why I wanted to leave it there.
Thanks, Dave.
Because that's a really important part of it is that bluesy sound as you were describing it, and I was like, you know what? We hadn't even mentioned the blues, and that's really a grounding part of what it is. It's a great John McLaughlin. He's been very generous with his time, again, with us here on member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and All Things Considered. Hope that you had fun going through some of this aspect of your history and talking about this great new Live in San Francisco record. I really do appreciate it, John.
Thank you. I've got a little message for your listeners if you want.
I would love to record it. I'm rolling, brother. Go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Aloha, it's John McLaughlin, and I bet you know why I'm here. Yes, I've been a guest on this show, All Things Considered, with my friend Dave Lawrence. Thanks, Dave. But right now, it's pledge drive time at Hawaii Public Radio. National Public Radio is the best radio in the U.S., and I even listen to it at home in Europe, okay? Please take a moment to contribute, whatever you can afford, and know we're grateful for your helping hand. So dig in and help NPR.
Man, I give you a huge hug. I'm so grateful for that, John. I'm really...
You bet, Dave. Well, I hope I get to see you over in Hawaii, brother.
I hope you'll come. I hope you'll come over here and do something for us, bro, because we really...
Yeah,
it would be nice to see you.
Before I finally disappear, I got to do it one time.
I don't even want to hear no talk of you disappearing, and good luck on your hands, okay?
Okay, man. Great to hear you, Dave. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. Be safe, John. God bless you, brother.
Take care. Bless you, too. Bye.